All right, it's 8 a.m. and this is our continuing special coverage of the State of the Nation speech due to be delivered by the President later this afternoon. In a short while, we shall be crossing live to Parliament buildings where KTN's Sharon Momanyi is standing by to give a sense of Kenyans' expectations of the speech. We shall also be live from our bureaus across the country, including Mombasa, where the question of insecurity remains a key concern. Here in studio, we shall be speaking to the Chair of Parliament's Foreign Relations and Defence Committee, Ndungu Gethenji. But first, here is our senior political reporter, Sam Ogina, who the President may not avoid in his speech.
The President steps up once again in Parliament to deliver his evaluation of Parliament's undertaking in propelling his administration's agenda. Uhuru will also be delivering his report card to the nation. The State of the Nation's address coming barely 2 weeks before marking 1-year anniversary since his inauguration as President. The President's speech Thursday will be anchored on 3 main crucial areas to position the nation as a regional socio-economic hub. Uhuru's address comes on the backdrop of a church attack in Likoni, Mombasa County, where gunmen indiscriminately sprayed worshippers, killing 6 and injuring a dozen others. Still in Mombasa, a booby-trapped vehicle was intercepted, with intelligence sources claiming it might have come in from Somalia.
We will deal decisively with any external threat to our citizens.
The recent events exposing fault lines in the country's intelligence gathering system and policing in the country. Insecurity has taken center stage in the country, with muggings, carjackings and break-ins on the rise. Deputy President William Ruto's communications director was kidnapped as residential brazen theft remains unchecked.
Yet threats to internal security still remain. We will deal with those threats with the same single-minded resolve.
Insiders close to the presidency indicate Uhuru will address the nation on the implementation of national values and ethics. And as such, the president has openly spoken against corruption deep-rooted in government, and in particular, pointing at his Harambee House office as a corruption den. Already, finance and procurement staff in the office of the president have been shuffled, moved to other ministries in a bid to break corruption cartels at Harambee House.
I will act swiftly to end the scourge of corruption. Corruption makes our country less attractive as an investment destination, and it limits access to much-needed services, stifling efficiency and eats away at our public values.
President Uhuru's administration is now grappling with austerity measures. 1 year in office, the president and his deputy have announced they will take a 20% pay cut, while cabinet secretaries will take a 10% pay cut. The president has directed all parastatal chiefs to follow suit and take a 10% pay cut.
All arms of government must set the example and lead the way in bringing this wage bill down.
Uhuru is also expected to submit to the nation Kenya's international obligations and relations with foreign powers. Samugina, KTN.
Well, in a related development, members of the National Assembly last evening rejected the Joint Defence National Security Committee report on the Westgate and other terror attacks around the country. The MPs termed the report as unsatisfactory. They demanded that recommendations with specific actions be made.
Scenes from the Westgate siege that was described by the United Nations as the worst terror attack since the 1998 bomb blast. Unidentified persons entered one of Kenya's high-end malls and opened fire, killing 67 people, both citizens and visiting foreigners. 6 months later, the mystery behind the attack still uncovered and many questions unanswered. And now, even a report by 2 parliamentary committees that was expected to open Kenyans' eyes as to what happened on the fateful day has been dismissed.
The first one was that there was general information of the impending terror attack at the malls and the strategic places in Nairobi, which means someone did his job, gave intelligence report to someone else, which someone else then did not act on those intelligence reports. Mr. Speaker, my understanding then is that a recommendation would have been targeting that person who did not act on the intelligence report, because then intelligence report was availed, someone is doing his job, but yet someone else is not sitting on the job. Mr. Speaker, that particular recommendation is not in this particular report.
Yesterday, members of the National Assembly rejected the Joint Defense National Security Committee report released on Westgate and other terror attacks around the country. They termed it as unsatisfactory as a number of questions were left unanswered. The Department of Immigration came under fire as MPs argued that it was full of corruption, with a number of illegal immigrants making their way into Kenya.
One of the recommendations is that we must close all the refugee camps. Every decision has a risk. There's no decision which is 100% perfect. If at all these are the people who are coming to terrorize this country, Mr. Speaker, sir, we do support that these refugee camps must be closed. We must do a cost-benefit analysis. Kenya has been humanitarian enough.
If you look at money laundering, if you look at IED, improvised explosive device, if you look about proliferation of arms, if you look at about refugee problems, about contraband goods, all of them are coming from Somalia.
Making the country an easy prey for terrorists, the MPs demanded investigations into the department alongside the National Intelligence Service. The MPs further say they want recommendations with specific actions made. The report had been prepared by the Committee on Administration and National Security and that of Defense and Foreign Relations. Ian Wafula, KTN Morning Express.
All right, and we are there. That's where we'd like to dig in and get the right answers, Sophia. We're joined in studio by the chair of the Defense Committee in Parliament, whose report was thrown out yesterday.
Yes, morning, James.
Good morning, Ndungu Gethenji, who's also a Tetu Member of Parliament. We appreciate you for being with us this morning. Thank you for making the time. But your report was rejected. It's a big day today, State of the Nation address. But let's begin with what happened with Westgate, because for many Kenyans, up to now, of course, very few will perhaps even get the opportunity to read this report. But as one of the committees that was part of this probe, what would you tell Kenyans now happened according to what you found at Westgate?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sophia. We are now a digital society, and Parliament has a very elaborate website, which also provides all committee reports, which are available on the parliamentary website. So Kenyans are at liberty to log onto the website and access this information, because it is a public document, it is public information, and the public has a right of access. So there should not be a feeling that the public cannot access any information from Parliament. We are the servants of the public,
digital government.
And we are digital government, and absolutely the public has every opportunity to access through the website. Let me just say, in response to some of the statements that were made by many of our colleagues, there were certainly recommendations made in our report, 18 of them to be specific. 56 legislators took a little over 2.5 months to go through the hearings, go through the evidence that was presented before the committee, and come up with the recommendations that were contained in the report. There were several observations made in the process, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Parliament has the right to accept or reject any bill, report, motion presented on the floor of the House. So we accept with great humility Parliament's decision, but again, this is not my report as the chair of the committee. This is the report of the joint committees, of the two joint committees, and it is the property of Parliament. Going to the actual event, and I made the representations on the floor of the House. This phenomenon that we are faced with is not just about one shopping mall in Nairobi. This phenomenon that we are faced with has deeper roots and has a greater agenda than we may wish to give credence. The phenomenon of Al-Shabaab cannot be resolved until the phenomenon of insecurity and instability and the base of Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda in Somalia is addressed comprehensively. And this was what was began with Operation Linda Inchi, because this was the fundamental effort that this country took a firm and decisive step to secure Kenya's economic interest, strategic interest in the region, tourism interests, and all other economic and security matters related to Al-Shabaab, piracy, incursion, contraband, bandit economy and things that were affecting this country negatively. So we may wish to zero in on this particular event because
Which
it was
the work
very
and the
high.
mandate you were given in this particular
The mandate
scenario?
was Westgate and other terrorist attacks in other parts of the country, including Mandera, including Wajir, including Garissa, including Isli. In fact, my colleague Yusuf Hassan complained that we didn't pay enough attention to the numerous terrorist attacks that happened in Isli. And he even gave a catalogue of the number of attacks, which was quite surprisingly high.
Okay.
But also in Coast Province as well.
As well. We want to continue with that conversation in a short while, and more so on what Westgate in itself, what you were able to find and why the members found that your report was shoddy, because there is a reason why. But let's first cross over to Parliament, where Sharon Momani is standing by for us. This is where President Uhuru Kenyatta will be coming later on in the afternoon. State of the Nation address expected. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning, Sophia.
Yes, I'm sure you've been able to talk to some of the Kenyans around Parliament. It's going to be a big day there. A lot of attention and eyes will be trained on Parliament. What do we expect?
Sophia, we haven't yet been able to speak to citizens around Parliament, but earlier on we had managed to do this, and a lot of expectations from the public on the address given by the President this afternoon here in Parliament, top of which is the matter of national security. And the address comes in the wake of serious concerns, and the public right now just wants to know what concrete plan does the government have with regard to containing the security situation in the country. There have been concerns that there is a lot of talk, but less action from the government. Some of the interventions that we have seen in the past days, Sophia, is that we've seen the Mombasa County Commissioner Nelson Marwa issuing the shoot to kill directive, which also just caused a lot of controversy, particularly among human rights, in the human rights sector, saying that even the suspects have a right to fair trial. And here in Nairobi, from Tuesday, we saw that police were conducting a raid, so to speak, and arrested about 500 people and gunned down 2 suspects. But really the questions that the public we spoke to earlier are asking is, this seems to be a bit of a band-aid kind of an intervention, and what they want to see the president's address this afternoon is what kind of long-term strategy do they have with regard to containing the security situation in the country. Another issue that the president is expected to address is the matter of economy, and one of which is the public wage bill debate, which he started himself, saying that he and his deputy president will be taking a 20% pay cut, and also directing that cabinet secretaries and public sector chiefs also take a 10% pay cut. So we wait to see what kind of direction this debate on the wage bill is going to take. Nairobi has also been stated to be one of the most expensive cities to live in Africa, and the cost of living in the country really at an alarming high. So Kenyans are really waiting to see what kinds of interventions the president is going to put in place, and perhaps just touch on these issues. And still on the economic state of the country, Sophia, we'll remember that when the Jubilee coalition was coming into government, they promised to create jobs, about 1 million jobs every year, something that really caused a lot of hope from the youth who are really looking forward to this creation. But there is little evidence to just what progress this is taking. And a lot of youth are just looking on to hear what kind of measures the government still has in place, and is this something that they still will be looking forward to? And a lot of people just putting their thoughts forward that could this unemployment situation in the country be linked to the rising cases of insecurity, because a disillusioned youth can be said to, it could be a contribution factor, so to speak, towards the rising case of insecurity. So just the number of issues that Kenyans will be expecting the president to address in his State of the Nation address this afternoon, Sophia.
Indeed, Sharon, thank you very much for that update coming to us live from Parliament buildings. We will definitely be covering that live, and we'll continue to get updates from you as well. Thank you for that. And in studio, we'll continue to talk to Gethenji, Member of Parliament of Tetu, and also the Chair of the Defence and Foreign Relations Committee. With me holding is also this report that they tabled in Parliament yesterday. It was rejected by members, and this is on Westgate. Several recommendations that you made, Heshimiwa, one of them that the government declare total war against Al-Shabaab, which has already happened technically.
Let me correct you, it has not happened. A declaration of war has to be ratified in Parliament, which has not happened. The President, as we saw, for instance, in the attacks on September 11th in the United States, the President declared war on Al-Qaeda, and that became an institutionalized framework and mechanism through their Senate, and actually mobilized the resources that were used in fighting Al-Qaeda in the war.
So it hasn't happened in as far as legislation is concerned, but we have had the President categorically address and speak to the issue, and even the fight against the Shabaab and any other enemies of the country.
We were calling for a formal declaration of war, which would then ultimately end up in Parliament for us to give force to, so that the necessary resources, whether it's allies from other countries or our own internal resources, can be mobilized and deployed in that war against Al-Shabaab.
One of the other recommendations you've made is a national interagency coordination center, which is really to be able to share that information, because that was a huge disaster at Westgate, conflicting information, changing from one time to the other. But as Kenyans will perhaps some will get the opportunity to look at this report and the recommendations you made, one of the biggest questions still continues to be who dropped the ball? Because the President did assure we would know heads would roll. That never happened. Who dropped the ball with Westgate?
You see, we took a lot of time to inquire into this particular event. What the public needs to appreciate is that Westgate attack was the end result of a continuum of planning. So there was people who decided that this is what they were going to do. They planned it, they mobilized, they organized, they facilitated, they
And there
financed.
was intelligence on that?
Let me get there. So the continuum of activity ended in the attack. Now, so the attack is the end game. What happens before is what we need to interrogate. How did we not have information that A, attack was being planned, B, individuals were mobilizing resources, and C, that the end target was a particular building. Now, this was a subject of much debate in our report. If you look at our recommendations and even our observations, observation number one is that there was general intelligence given. And that word is specific, general intelligence given. Anybody who knows anything about intelligence as pertains to national security should know that intelligence should be three things. It should be timely, it should be specific, and it should be actionable. So timely, it can't come after the event or minutes before the event. Specific, it should say that this facility or this institution is being targeted. Actionable, saying what type of event is going to take place so that you can prepare yourself and take action against the event happening. Now, when we said in our observations that there was general intelligence information given, it means that those three things were not fulfilled. So it also means that, and you heard Inspector General Kimayo severally in the public domain has said there was no intelligence given. So what we decided to do is, and this has not been only in this jurisdiction, it appears that there is no communication or very little communication or indeed silos of communication within some of the security agencies. In order to break that down, the recommendation was that we create a new institution, the Directorate of National Security. That institution would then be placed above all the security agency institutions, will be fed by agents from various security agencies, but will have a single director reporting directly to the President, who will be able to share all information across all the intelligence and security agencies on a single information communication platform, so that the issue of I gave intelligence, I didn't give intelligence will never arise, because you have one source of information, one collection point, and one reporting line to the head of state.
So was the intelligence given or was it not given?
As far as we have seen in our report, and we have presented it very clearly, there was general intelligence given. There was no specific, as far as we appreciated, actionable intelligence. I said this on the floor of the House, that general information was given. We wanted to see reports from intelligence organizations telling us that this building was going to be attacked.
Okay.
There were historical reports, some over a year old, talking about the same target. But is it timely? Is it actionable? These are the
That
questions.
isn't as far as intelligence is concerned. From the day of the attack that lasted 4 days, a lot of, conflicting information from 15 to 10 terrorists finding out, being told mattresses are burning, to some are dead, they're not dead, they disappeared, all manner of things that went into it. And as far as that operation was conducted, could it have been done better? Who dropped the ball, did you find, in your probing of this attack?
Hindsight, as they say, is always 20/20. In an event of this nature, and this has not only been in Kenyan experience, this has been in the experience of countries which have had a major terrorist event of this nature, including the United States and including India in the Mumbai terrorist attacks. The attackers will study weaknesses in systems. Attackers will exploit even weaknesses in societies. Corruption, people will be paid money to keep quiet about activities going on in their neighborhood, and so on and so forth. So the end game at the event is the playing out of all the weaknesses that have happened
Right.
on the stage of the event or the attack. How it is managed and how it is dealt with depends on capacitation, historical precedents, and so on. This was the first time we've had this type of event. In Mumbai, the event took 8 days to end. In Kenya, it took 4 days to end. We are not saying we managed the situation better than in Mumbai, because some of the elements in Mumbai and Kenya were different.
For our situation, what were the shortcomings? Where did we fail? What do we need to work on going forward?
We said this in our report.
Yeah.
The one thing that was very critical in the execution of this attack was that the terrorists were able to use unregistered SIM cards, or SIM cards registered with people with fake IDs. Yet there is a law in Kenya that says that all telecom networks have to deregister SIM cards that are not registered on the network, deactivate SIM cards that are not registered on the network. Yet these people had multiple SIM cards that were switching from the various networks and able to communicate. So it meant traceability and accountability of those SIM cards was not adhered to. There was the issue of course, coordination, and this is why we said in the report, we need a single agency doing all the coordination. There is an issue of capacitation in terms of counterterrorism response. We said in the report that we needed a new institution to be developed, which is specific for counterterrorism action within the police force. Now, we of course have the Recce Company, which is an elite unit within the force. But if you look at other jurisdictions, there are several specialist units within either the police or even in the military, which are specific to asymmetric warfare and counterterrorism, even in urban situations.
Right.
So these elements we addressed, we looked at them and said these were areas which were openings which were exploited by the terrorists, and we need to close them.
And yet, Mheshimiwa, after all that work, your colleagues, the people, Kenyans elected to represent them in Parliament, say this is shoddy work, this is not answering questions, it's not helping, it does not provide a way forward. Why did they reject this report?
Well, the question of why can only be answered by individual members, but and of course, as I said, it's the prerogative of Parliament to pass or reject any bill, motion, or report. I do not agree that anything that comes out of the National Assembly can be termed as shoddy, because these are serious leaders who have spent time and public resources to undertake or carry out inquiries and investigations. And one of the shortcomings, and I must admit on air, when we called for the public to bring information, the response was completely minimal.
Okay.
So there also needs to be a joint responsibility. That if somebody is tasked with a function, they must be capacitated. So in terms of the information that we were receiving from the public and many of the people who either say things on social media or present things even through the television, should have been able to bring that information.
Did somebody
to
like
the
Sonko
committee.
perhaps appear, the Senator Nairobi County? He had said that there was intelligence. Did he appear before the committee? Did he give the evidence he said he had?
No, he did not. It's in the report. I think the date he was due to appear, he had another engagement, so he was not able to appear before the committee. So again, you see, these are the challenges that we have, is that information that we require to compile a report for the public is not forthcoming.
So are you saying then you have a report that you did not have sufficient information to allow for you to have the best report ever? If you were to do this again, you do it differently?
The issue
that there was not enough
The issue of sufficiency is how long is a piece of string, because we don't know how much information is out there. So we don't know what is sufficient in terms of what we received. But we were surprised at the beginning, especially from the public, because we were under the impression that the public, especially those who were in and around the event, had a lot of information that would help us in constructing the pieces and the anatomy of what happened on the day. But this was very, very little and far between.
What about the other stakeholders, the intelligence, those others? Who else did you talk to, and did you receive enough to come up with this? Because then if at the end of the day, after months after the attack, Kenyans were hoping this would be, that clarity that would come, okay, this is what happened, and going forward, perhaps I'll feel safer because there's an endorsement that, yes, that has covered all bases. But if there is that lack of confidence, going forward, then we're back to ground zero, and yet Kenya continues to grapple with other terrorist attacks in other parts of the country as well.
A very pertinent question. In fact, when you say we're back to ground zero, moments or weeks before we were to debate this report, a car bomb was found in Mombasa. Now the question is, how does a vehicle brought from, we're told, Afmado in Somalia, come all the way from Somalia into Kenya, undetected, find its way to be parked outside a police station with explosives? Now, the first thing that comes to mind is certainly anybody who knows anything about explosives would know that car cannot be driven from where it was, from Somalia to Kenya, with explosives on board. So those explosives would naturally have had to come locally. And the technology and the knowledge and the know-how of assembly of that device is very specific. And for us, to have that situation raises questions again. And in fact, we will be inquiring as our committee into how that vehicle ended up in Kenya, outside a police station near the State House of the Republic, undetected for so long. It sat there for 4 days, we're told by the media. So we need to understand, what continues to ail us, because it's not just about this event. There is a continuous ailment that we try to address by giving recommendations for creating of new institutions, but we are beyond that now. We now have to interrogate what continues to ail us.
What continues to ail us? People listening and watching this interview will say, even if you probe this other, the attack which was averted in Mombasa with that particular vehicle, they're still not answered on Westgate. And so the president addresses the country today. This, of course, was a big attack in Kenya's history, caught the attention of the world as well. And he'll be addressing the question of security. What do you, in your opinion, and as also the chair of this committee, which is critical defense, with your role, if people are not, the members of parliament are not satisfied with this, going forward with all these other attacks and all these other things going on and the threats, and Kenyans not feeling safe, what do you think has to come through in today's speech from the president?
I think the president must give hope to Kenyans on the front of security. I think the president must take decisive action on his security agencies. I think the president needs also, excuse me, to instill in the minds of the public that security is all of our concern. And you will never be secure enough by adding more policemen, more intelligence agents, or more military on your borders. If your citizenry does not take ownership and responsibility for the security on the ground. Today, we have a situation in Mombasa where religious leaders can openly praise Al-Shabaab and condemn our own security forces, can openly call for the radicalization of youth to carry out attacks on Kenyans, their own fellow Kenyans, and nothing happens. These are members of our society. These are members of our community. Why do we allow these things to happen?
Yeah.
Why do we allow, for instance, people to rent houses next to us? And you can see they're financially able. We don't know their source of income.
Yeah.
We don't know where they came from. Vehicles are moving in and out, but we don't report this to the police or the security agency. So security is as much our responsibility as it is the head of state and the security agencies. But the president must now call for a radical and fundamental social transformation in thinking by the Kenyan people to own their space, to own their security, to own their country. Because nobody will come and defend it for us. We must defend it for ourselves.
Okay. Earlier on, we were, engaging with our viewers, asking them to share with us what they would want the president to address today in his speech. I'll read for you a couple of the tweets that are coming through. Calvin's Omondi says he should address the issue of insecurity, economy, the wage bill, and corruption on as far as state of the nation is concerned. Jane says insecurity. She wants long-lasting solutions to that. Cornelius, and perhaps many would feel this way, hata nikisema he won't address it, just wait for this speech, and several others that I'll read as we go along. But the president has made very many, there's been a lot of tough talking as far as security is concerned, corruption as well, which we've had quite a number of Kenyans talking about. What action does now needs to happen? Because we keep hearing, and this is another speech, good that we get the reassurance, that we get the, I'm against this and I'm against that. But somebody like Cornelius who feels, even if I, say, there's an attitude that is quickly settling in, a story that ran earlier, sociologists were saying, you don't want to get your population to a point where that even no matter what you do, even when you do good things, they don't notice or realize. Why? Because they've already been gotten to a corner where, they just stalk, they don't do. Yeah.
I think socialization of the society is a major element for our social transformation and development. And the media has a major role to play in this, in the sense that the media must also take responsibility and highlight the successes and gains that are made by the country at large, not just by the executive, even in parliament, even in the counties. That the media must talk up successes and gains made by our nation, because it's also easy to focus on the negativity, because the negativity is human nature. It will always be there. There is no human society that does not have negative events,
right,
or situations. So we must, as a nation, now start to build on the positive. Certainly correct the negative, but not focus only on negative things, because then you will have this negative downward spiral of apathy that the society will have, that nothing good happens in this country, which is not true. If you look at what we've done, how Kenya has progressed in the last 1 year, the relationship Kenya is building within the African continent, regional integration is moving very fast. These are all creating opportunities for Kenyans to exploit in East Africa, in the Great Lakes region, where we do not have an opportunity here. We must encourage our society and our people to go out into the region and exploit opportunities, because there are massive opportunities. 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. And if the world recognizes this and they are leaving their shores to come here, what stops us from just walking across the border to Tanzania or to Uganda and doing some business? So we must, cease the culture of negativity, cease the culture of...
But you do understand where the negativity comes from.
Absolutely. It is human nature. We understand it.
Not just human nature, but it's as a result of issues unresolved over a long period of time.
Yes.
And so then guys get, the general public will get into culture also of just feeling in a spirit of discouragement.
Despondency and apathy.
Despondency.
We also must remember that Kenya has had a long history. Much of it has been non-progressive. There are several issues to do with leadership and governance, which are legacy issues. For instance, we found them there.
Okay.
If we look at my particular constituency, I will go there and say, the things that I find half-built projects, legacy issues, things that have been historical. Now, we must appreciate that this administration has been there for just over a year, and there are more legacy issues to deal with than developmental and constructive issues.
Okay.
So we must be able to differentiate and help the public. I think media has a major role in this. You
You're
must
throwing
help.
The ball
you
back.
must help the public.
Well,
because you're an important, socio-economic aspect of this community. You're the fifth estate. You must, the fourth estate. You must be able to help in socializing the community or the public for the good of the country.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're going to continue the conversation. Let's hear about the sentiments of viewers from Eldoret who we spoke to, and here's what they had to say as far as the expectations ahead of the State of the Nation address.
Ningependa rais tena aongee kuhusu wage bill, vile mjadala unaendelea. Naona ya kwamba hapo pale ameshikilia ni mzuri, aweze kushikiliana pia wale washikadau wengine, ili pia wage bill iweze kupunguka, ndio mwananchi wa kawaida pia tuache kuteseka hapa chini mashinani, ili tuzuie tunatoa pesa yote inaenda kwa kodi.
Another thing is unemployment among youth. The president to address the Kenyans concerning youths who are unemployed.
Mimi sina story mob, security ban. Hakuna haja tukae kwa hii nchi yetu ka wasema refugee. So mimi naona angalia story ya security na pia mambo ya counties. Hatupendi venye, hatufurahi venye mambo ya counties zinaendeshwa.
Ufisadi na ile hali ya nchi kuwa na utajiri upande mwingine umasikini. Ile bridge imekuwa kubwa sana. Maskini ako chini sana. Kama angeweza kabisa kujaribu kuambatanisha utajiri, angalau ipungue, wale wa chini wapandishwe juu.
The inequalities, indeed corruption as well, some of the issues and insecurity that Kenyans are hoping that the president will address today. Let's talk about the question of insecurity a little bit more, and it is no doubt going to be top on the president's agenda. At least that is what many Kenyans will be hoping. But one directive issued by a county commissioner, that is the shoot-to-kill order, has been met with anger in some quarters. A section of the civil society and security analysts say the order will do little to solve the bigger problem. Here's Ashamulu with that report.
As they widened their search for terror suspects across the country, police announced their most controversial strategy yet.
Wale si watu wa kushikwa wamepatikana ndiye huyu ako na hiyo bunduki. Mariza yeye hapo.
And it's no surprise the shoot-to-kill order has been met with much criticism.
He is giving authority to the police to be the investigators, the judges, and the executioners. That is not the country that Kenyans determined in 2010 when they passed the Constitution of Kenya.
But just how effective will this strategy be, especially at a time when security threats have evolved?
You kill the messenger and you spare the master, who can plan a similar killings in future.
The worst thing for the security apparatus is when the citizenry begins to doubt you. You could be doing a good job, but as long as everybody on the street is saying, I know, then you have a problem. Because whatever you do, then guys don't appreciate it, number one, and they rubbish it, number two.
It is the responsibility of the government to study, not kill. Shoot to kill is not a solution. How many people will you kill? Okay? And the more you kill, people will come, because it's an ideology believing that when I am killed, I will go to paradise.
I think whitewashing everybody by saying they're all in the same boat, everybody perhaps that comes from outside might preach radicalism, may not be the right answer.
It's not the first time police are taking this hard stance on security. The Inspector General of Police gave a similar order last year, right before terrorists attacked the Westgate Mall in Nairobi, killing more than 67 people.
We have to deal with them very firmly. And this is what I'm urging and instructing all the officers in the country to use their firearms effectively the way they have been empowered by law.
In 2005, when the cultural religious sect Mungiki had gotten out of hand, the then Internal Security Minister John Mishuki issued the directive.
Weapon
in the hands of a criminal has no other purpose except to kill an innocent person. It is therefore justifiable for the law enforcers to take equal measures against such a person.
A special force within the police service was tasked with dealing with Mungiki. They gunned down dozens of men connected to the sect, and after a while, the group went underground. Police appear to be employing a similar tactic in dealing with today's security threats.
Last Friday tuliswaga 5. Halafu Sunday wawili tumeokoa bunduki. Kuna wawili wamebaki hapa.
Munguki, they don't have an agenda beyond Kenya. These people, they are victims of the historical injustices. But this one, they have an agenda beyond Kenya. They have a global agenda. So it is a political solution rather than what they call a military solution.
Let's engage directly. Take communities, bring them together, especially their leaders, and find out what those issues are that are underscoring it. These sort of things don't happen without somebody nurturing the environment for malcontents to take place, for issues like that are generated by malcontents to take place. Who's nurturing them? Why would they nurture them?
Even though the Mombasa County Commissioner has given officers on the ground the go-ahead to gun down terror suspects, experts warn that police may have to rethink this strategy. Asha Mwilu, KTN, Nairobi.
Thank you, Asha. State of the Nation address coming up indeed later on in the day from President Uhuru Kenyatta. And in studio, we're talking more about some of those issues that perhaps will be addressed by the President in his speech. You've heard about the shoot-to-kill order. What are your thoughts?
In fact, it's interesting that we're having this debate because it also indicates how far Kenya has come. Because in years gone by, we wouldn't even be discussing this. This would have been happening and there would be no recourse. But certainly the posture that security forces have to take presently against this type of radical criminality has to be aggressive. We must be prepared as a nation to sacrifice a lot of civil liberties in order to achieve the level of security that we need to achieve, because we have so many theaters of operation, whether it's in cyberspace where you have forums which are radicalizing Kenyans and other forums which are teaching people how to do harm to Kenyans. We have cross-border incursions, we have piracy, we have terrorist attacks of various nature coming into the country.
Yes.
So all of these demonstrate that there's a high level of sophistication and a high level of determination for people to do Kenyans harm.
Okay.
So in order for us to get to the level where we secure our nation's interests and our people, there must be some level of sacrifice of civil liberties, be it in surveillance technology, or be it in the aggressive posture against terrorism on the streets.
Right.
That sacrifice, I think, has to be made.
Okay, and as we continue the conversation, if you're just joining us, you are seeing that news alert news we're receiving right now. There has been a fire, there is a fire. As you can see, industrial area, we're yet to get information on what facility exactly is on fire, what caused the fire, but we understand efforts are underway to put it out. Manji and Durakot, we understand, the ones on fire, that is industrial area, will continue to bring you those updates. It is near, not Manji and Durakot, near Manji and Durakot, one of the facilities in that particular area. It's just some of the news we're getting in our newsroom right now. The news alert will continue to bring you those updates as we get more information on what exactly is happening, what facility is on fire, what caused the fire. But we understand that efforts are underway to put that fire out. Again, it's a facility that's next to Durakot and Manji that is on fire. Huge smoke being seen from that part of the industrial area. And we'll continue to bring you this update. So near house of Manji and Durakot is where that fire is understood to be in one of the facilities around that area. And we'll continue to bring you the updates. You're talking about the shoot-to-kill order and how it has been received. Some argue that it is a government that has gotten so desperate, and it's when you talk up to civil society and some of the human rights activists, they argue this is taking us to anarchy. This is taking us to days that we should not even be having such a conversation, because no matter who it is, they have not been proven guilty. This is a person who's decided, I'm going to shoot this person. That's how they would look at it, and not that you've shot, so I'm going to shoot you as well.
Well, I think there's a danger of us over intellectualizing, a security posture. For instance, in a situation where people would want to take arms against innocent civilians, and they are engaged actively in executing people or shooting people, and they're armed with intent to kill, how do you arrest that person? Because they also will be firing at the security forces.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of intellectualization of this event, and not even appreciating the role of the security officer on the ground, who is on the front line and facing that bullet and ready to take that bullet in the defense of the Kenyan public. So it's all well and good for civil society, human rights organizations to sit behind a desk and pontificate about how to engage a terrorist with a firearm, an AK-47, and not put themselves in the position where the security personnel is faced with a bullet, at the risk of taking a bullet in defense of Kenyan public.
Okay. As we move perhaps from security, one more question. With your committee on defense and the issues you have, even with the truck that had been at the police headquarters in Mombasa for 4 days ahead of that botched attack, the question of foreigners coming into the country, how closely are you working with immigration to ensure that your efforts to ensure Kenya is protected from attacks from outside, people who are not supposed to be in here terrorizing Kenyans, doesn't happen? Do you have any sort of working together in the past, and what has that been able to achieve?
The Immigration Department is oversighted by the Committee on Administration and National Security, which is chaired by Honorable Asman Kamama, who was the co-chair of this joint committee. But we certainly identified in our report, and one of the recommendations in our report was that the Department of Immigration has to undergo radical surgery. The reason we said this was because it became apparent that there are a lot of Kenyan national identification documentation in the wrong hands. Either Somali nationals, from Somalia, not even Kenyan Somalis, but Somali nationals from Somalia, holding passports, holding identification documents, primary document, which is the ID, are being given to people crossing the border, whether they're fake or genuine or being obtained illegally. These matters are still squarely in the domain of the Immigration Department. So there is clearly a problem in the Department of Immigration, and we recommended in our report radical surgery.
All right. Another issue, Mheshimiwa, as we bring this to a close, we've had many Kenyans talk about, it has been a national dialogue issue as well, is the wage bill. And the president taking a cut or saying he would, the cabinet secretaries. Would you consider a pay cut for the people of Tetu, perhaps?
I already did. I announced shortly after that I was ready to take, and I will take a 10% pay cut, and I would wish that the savings would be then put into the bursaries for Tetu, so that our children can have more resources to enable them to study. I've already instructed my secretariat to write to the clerk of the National Assembly to give effect to that pronouncement.
So when you take a pay cut, you also have the authority to direct what the money you're not now taking home goes to?
I will request that. Whether that will be possible or not, I will be advised. But that would be my wish, that would be my desire. Because ultimately, when we are looking for savings in the wage bill, it is to enable us to do more public service. But I wanted to say this with regard to the wage bill. There is focus on the wage bill because it is real, it is pertinent. 500 million paid to salaries and annual expenditure is high.
Okay.
But there's the other side of the equation, which is leakage and loss. The Auditor General the other day came out with a report saying figures keep changing, but 500 million in 2 years, which shows you that if that is addressed, then the wage bill will cease to be an issue, or its priority as being an issue will be reduced.
Okay.
The other element is to increase the economic basket and economic activities, which Kenya is actually on the verge of doing now. And this is why we must focus and support all efforts to build the infrastructure projects, LAPSET, the railway, to integrate regionally, to expand our market, to exploit the relationship with Ethiopia, which we've signed a most favored trading nation status.
Right.
That is a market of 80 million people, which we can trade with and do economic activities and exploit for our mutual benefit.
Okay.
And so the wage bill is one aspect which requires focus and attention, but it cannot be the only thing on the agenda.
Indeed, it cannot be the only thing, and we'll wait to see what the president will choose to put front and center as he addresses the nation later on today. Ndungu Gethenji, Chair of the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee and Tetu Member of Parliament, thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you,
we
Sophie.
appreciate great conversation with you today.